The species that endured. For nearly 300 years after joining the Galactic Union, humanity carried a reputation unlike any other species. They were known for their patience. In a galaxy filled with powerful empires, aggressive warlords, and civilizations that answered every insult with force, humans were different. They preferred diplomacy over conflict, negotiation over threats, and cooperation over conquest. At first, many species admired these qualities. Later, they began to exploit them. The Galactic Union spanned thousands of star systems and hundreds of intelligent species. Ancient civilizations such as the Verek Dominion, the Citeri Collective, and the Kelea Consortium controlled most of the political and economic power. Humanity, despite its rapid growth, remained a relatively young member. To the older powers, humans were useful, but not important. Whenever trade agreements were negotiated, human interests were often ignored. Whenever disputes arose, human colonies somehow ended up receiving the worst outcomes. Whenever resources were divided, humanity seemed to receive less than everyone else. The pattern continued year after year. Human ambassadors protested respectfully. Human representatives filed official complaints. Human leaders requested investigations. Nothing changed. Over time, many species came to believe that humans simply lacked the courage to stand up for themselves. They mistook patience for weakness. The jokes began spreading across the galaxy. At diplomatic gatherings, alien officials laughed that humans would rather write a complaint than fire a weapon. Military analysts dismissed Earth as a minor power. Commentators mocked humanity as the species that apologized for everything. The insults became so common that few people even questioned them anymore. Yet while the galaxy laughed, humanity remained focused on something else. Building. Learning. Preparing. Far from the political spotlight of the Galactic Union, human engineers constructed massive shipyards around distant stars. Scientists developed new propulsion systems. Industrial worlds expanded production capabilities. Explorers charted unknown regions beyond Union space. Most of this activity attracted little attention. Why would anyone pay close attention to a species they considered harmless? That assumption would become the galaxy's greatest mistake. Among humanity's many colonies, one of the most successful was a frontier world called New Dawn. Located near several major trade routes, New Dawn had grown from a small settlement into a thriving colony of nearly 12 million people. Its cities were modern and prosperous. Its economy flourished. Its people believed they were building a bright future. Then the Verek Dominion arrived. Officially, the Verek claimed there was a dispute regarding navigation rights and territorial boundaries. Unofficially, everyone knew the truth. The colony occupied valuable territory. The Verek wanted it. A powerful Verek fleet entered the system and established what they called a temporary security presence. Human colonial leaders immediately protested. Messages were sent to the Galactic Union. Emergency hearings were requested. Human diplomats demanded intervention. Nothing happened. Weeks turned into months. The Verek presence grew stronger. Trade routes were restricted. Cargo inspections became increasingly aggressive. Essential supplies were delayed. Communication networks experienced unexplained disruptions. Life on New Dawn became more difficult with each passing day. Still, humanity chose diplomacy. Still, they trusted the system. Still, they waited. Many believed the Galactic Union would eventually step in. They were wrong. Tensions continued rising until a peaceful protest erupted in the colony's capital city. Thousands of civilians gathered to demand the removal of Verek forces. Families attended. Workers attended. Students attended. The demonstration remained peaceful. Then everything changed. No one ever discovered exactly who fired the first shot. What happened afterward was undeniable. Verek security forces opened fire on the crowd. Panic spread instantly. People ran in every direction. Parents desperately tried to protect their children. Emergency responders rushed toward the wounded. The shooting continued. When it finally ended, thousands of innocent civilians were dead. The images shocked everyone who saw them. Security recordings captured every horrifying moment. Within hours, the footage spread throughout human space. Entire worlds watched in disbelief. A father shielding his daughter from incoming fire. Families searching desperately for loved ones. Across Earth and its colonies, millions sat in stunned silence. Many refused to believe such a tragedy could happen. Others waited for the Galactic Union to respond. The response came quickly. And it was not enough. Union officials announced an investigation. Committees were formed. Hearings were scheduled. Experts promised answers. The process would take months. Perhaps years. To humanity, the message was clear. Once again, justice would be delayed. Once again, bureaucracy would protect the powerful. Then something unusual happened. Humanity went silent. No angry speeches followed. No emergency declarations were issued. No diplomats appeared before Union cameras demanding action. Instead, human representatives quietly disappeared from Galactic Union proceedings. Seats that had always been occupied suddenly sat empty. Messages sent to Earth received brief, polite replies. Nothing more. Days passed. Then weeks. The silence unsettled everyone. Humanity had always argued. Humanity had always negotiated. Humanity had always tried to work within the system. Now they weren't saying anything at all. Military observers soon noticed unusual activity within human territory. Shipyards began operating around the clock. Construction rates increased dramatically. Supply fleets moved between systems in unprecedented numbers. Long-range sensors detected thousands of vessels leaving hidden docks. Then tens of thousands. Analysts rushed to verify the reports. The numbers seemed impossible. No one had realized humanity possessed such industrial capacity. No one had imagined they had been preparing for so long. Panic began spreading through the governments that had spent centuries underestimating them. For the first time, a powerful civilization started asking a dangerous question. What if human patience had never been weakness? What if it had been restraint? As more intelligence reports arrived, the answer became increasingly clear. Humanity had spent generations giving the galaxy every opportunity to choose fairness. Every opportunity to choose cooperation. Every opportunity to choose justice. The massacre at New Dawn had changed everything. Because for the first time in centuries, humanity had stopped asking. And throughout the galaxy, a growing sense of dread began to spread. Something was coming. Something enormous. And no species would ever forget what happened next. The gathering storm. The first emergency meeting took place on the Varek homeworld only hours after the human delegation vanished from the Galactic Union. Deep beneath the capital city, military commanders, the intelligence directors, and senior government officials crowded around a massive holographic display. Normally, such meetings were calm and orderly. This one was neither. The display showed hundreds of blinking markers spread across human-controlled space. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Then the data began appearing. One intelligence officer activated a new layer. Thousands of additional markers flooded the projection. The room fell silent. "Those are shipyards?" asked a commander. "Yes. All of them." "All confirmed." Several officials exchanged nervous looks. For centuries, humanity had presented itself as a cooperative trading power. Their fleets rarely appeared outside defensive patrols. Their diplomats spoke more often than their admirals. No one had expected this. The officer continued. Most facilities were disguised as civilian infrastructure. Some were hidden inside asteroid belts. Others were constructed beneath planetary oceans or inside hollowed moons. The holographic map zoomed outward. More shipyards appeared. Then more. And more. The number became difficult to comprehend. Entire manufacturing networks stretched across dozens of systems. Automated factories operated around the clock. Mining operations supplied resources directly to military construction platforms. Everything connected together with remarkable efficiency. "How long?" another official asked quietly. The answer chilled the room. "Approximately 180 years." No one spoke. For nearly 2 centuries, humanity had been preparing while appearing harmless. The realization struck like a physical blow. Every assumption the galaxy held about humans suddenly seemed questionable. Back on Earth, the mood was very different. The footage from New Dawn had spread everywhere. Homes, schools, factories, spaceports. Millions watched recordings of the massacre in stunned silence. Parents saw children caught in the crossfire. Workers saw unarmed civilians fleeing through smoke-filled streets. Doctors watched medics being targeted while treating the wounded. The images became impossible to forget. Across human worlds, memorials appeared almost overnight. Candles lined city streets. Names of the victims were projected onto buildings. Entire planets observed moments of silence. But beneath the grief, something else was growing. Resolve. For generations, humanity had endured insult after insult. Colonies had been exploited. Trade routes manipulated. Treaties ignored. Each time, human leaders chose restraint. Many believed diplomacy would eventually prevail. Now that belief was fading. The people of New Dawn had followed every rule. They had trusted the system. And the system had failed them. 3 days later, the world leaders gathered inside the United Planetary Assembly on Earth. Representatives arrived from hundreds of human settlements. The meeting remained completely private. No journalists entered. No recordings leaked. Even military personnel were denied access. Outside, reporters waited anxiously. Inside, humanity's future was being decided. The discussions lasted 72 continuous hours. Arguments erupted. Voices rose. Old disagreements resurfaced. Some leaders demanded immediate retaliation. Others warned against repeating the mistakes of history. Several argued that war would only create more suffering. Yet everyone agreed on one thing. New Dawn could not be ignored. When the meeting finally ended, the exhausted delegates emerged from the chamber. They offered no explanations. No interviews. No details. Instead, the single message appeared simultaneously across every human communication network. Every screen. Every terminal. Every colony. 3 simple sentences. Justice delayed has become justice denied. The victims of New Dawn will be remembered. Humanity will act. The announcement traveled through the galaxy like a shockwave. Governments immediately requested clarification. None came. Diplomatic channels flooded with inquiries. Most received polite but brief acknowledgements. Human officials refused further comment. The silence was unsettling. Humanity had always explained itself before. Humanity had always negotiated. Now, there was only quiet determination. Military analysts became increasingly concerned. Long-range sensors detected unusual activity throughout human territory. Shipyards increased production dramatically. Supply fleets moved constantly between systems. Strategic reserves were activated. Personnel transfers reached unprecedented levels. At first, the outside observers assumed the movements were defensive. Then the numbers became impossible to dismiss. Thousands of warships began leaving construction docks. Then thousands more. Entire fleets appeared where none had existed before. The scale exceeded every previous estimate of human military capability. Experts scrambled to revise their reports. Governments demanded updated assessments. The conclusions frightened everyone. Humanity possessed one of the largest military-industrial networks in known space. And somehow, nobody had noticed. The revelation spread rapidly. Across the Galactic Union, panic quietly replaced confidence. The Varec leadership attempted to maintain calm. Publicly, they dismissed the reports. Humanity was bluffing, they claimed. The ships were exaggerated. The threat was overstated. Privately, however, the emergency defense plans were activated. Strategic assets were repositioned. Border patrols doubled. For the first time, Varec commanders considered the possibility that they had made a catastrophic mistake. 11 days after humanity's declaration, their fears became reality. At precisely 4:17 Galactic Standard Time, alarms sounded across Varec space. Communication networks failed. Military satellites stopped responding. Navigation systems began malfunctioning. Defense grids lost synchronization. Entire command centers struggled to understand what was happening. The disruption spread faster than anyone thought possible. Within minutes, critical infrastructure across dozens of systems experienced simultaneous failures. No shots had been fired. No fleets had appeared. Yet chaos was already spreading. Then the second phase began. Massive human task forces emerged from hyperspace throughout Varec-controlled territory. Not randomly. Not recklessly. Precisely. Every fleet arrived exactly where it needed to be. Strategic shipyards. Military supply depots. Command facilities. Weapons platforms. The operation displayed a level of coordination that stunned military observers. Entire academies would later spend decades studying those opening hours. The Varec expected planetary bombardments. They expected revenge. They expected destruction. Instead, they received a transmission. The same message arrived in every occupied system. The same words appeared on every military frequency. We seek accountability, not conquest. Confusion spread through Varec command structures. Why weren't the humans attacking civilian targets? Why weren't cities burning? Why were food distribution networks still functioning? Human fleets could have inflicted enormous damage. Instead, they focused exclusively on military objectives. Supply routes remained open. Hospitals continued operating. Civilian infrastructure was left untouched. Even enemy evacuation vessels were allowed safe passage. The restraint shocked the galaxy. Many observers felt relief. Perhaps negotiations were still possible. Perhaps the crisis could be contained. Then new evidence emerged. Investigators examining the New Dawn massacre uncovered hidden records. Encrypted communications were decrypted. Witness testimony surfaced. Military orders were recovered. The truth was worse than anyone imagined. The massacre had not been a tragic accident. Planned. Approved by senior officials who believed terrorizing a human colony would strengthen Varec control over the region. When the evidence became public, outrage exploded across human worlds. The last hopes for a peaceful resolution vanished overnight. And as human fleets continued their relentless advance through Varec territory, one terrifying realization spread throughout the galaxy. Human patience had never been weakness. It had been discipline. And now that discipline was moving forward with unstoppable purpose. The storm that humanity had held back for centuries had finally arrived. And it was only beginning. The reckoning. 3 months after the first human fleets entered Varec territory, the balance of power across the galaxy had changed completely. The mighty Varec dominion, once considered untouchable, was collapsing. Not because its worlds had been destroyed. Not because its cities burned. But because every military advantage it had spent centuries building was disappearing one careful, calculated step at a time. Human forces moved with astonishing precision. Shipyards were captured intact. Weapons stockpiles were secured. Command centers were neutralized without unnecessary casualties. Every operation followed the same principle. Maximum effectiveness. Minimum suffering. The contrast was impossible to ignore. The species once mocked as weak had become the most disciplined military force the galaxy had ever witnessed. Across countless worlds, citizens watched the conflict unfold through news networks and public broadcasts. At first, many expected the humans to eventually lose control. History suggested they would. Every major power that gained overwhelming military superiority eventually succumbed to revenge, greed, or arrogance. Yet humanity continued to defy expectations. Day after day. Week after week. The restraint never broke. Meanwhile, inside the Varek capital, panic spread through government ranks. Senior officials who once laughed at human protests now lived in constant fear. Many attempted to flee. Private storeships departed in secret. Hidden financial accounts were emptied. Sensitive records vanished from government databases. Everyone seemed desperate to escape accountability. But humanity had anticipated that as well. For generations, human intelligence agencies had quietly expanded their networks. Analysts tracked political developments throughout the galaxy. Investigators collected evidence. Historians preserved records. Patterns were studied. Connections mapped. Now all that preparation was paying off. One by one, fugitives disappeared from the shadows. Some were arrested while attempting to cross borders. Others were located on remote colonies. Several surrendered voluntarily after realizing escape was impossible. The message became clear. No one responsible for New Dawn would simply vanish. Then came the broadcast that changed everything. It began without warning. Every major communication network across non-space interrupted its programming simultaneously. Screens flickered. News reports paused. Entertainment channels went silent. Then the image of human Admiral Elena Ward appeared. She stood alone behind a simple podium. No military banners. No displays of power. No dramatic music. Just a calm expression and steady eyes. Trillions watched. No one looked away. For several seconds, she said nothing. The silence itself seemed powerful. Then she began speaking. For generations, many believed this conflict began at New Dawn. A series of images appeared beside her. Old reports. Historical records. Forgotten investigations. They were mistaken. The images multiplied. Colony disputes. Trade abuses. Illegal seizures. Suppressed evidence. Cases stretching back more than 200 years. The audience watched in stunned silence. Most species had known some discrimination existed. Few understood its true scale. Humanity had documented everything. Every broken agreement. Every ignored complaint. Every injustice that had been quietly buried beneath bureaucracy and political influence. Yet Admiral Ward's tone remained calm. There was no anger in her voice. No hatred. Only certainty. Humanity tolerated these actions because we believed cooperation was still possible. Another image appeared. The memorial wall of New Dawn. Thousands of names illuminated against a dark sky. We now understand that accountability is also necessary. Then came the evidence. Thousands of classified files were released simultaneously. Military orders. Private communications. Encrypted directives. Financial transactions. Internal discussions among senior Varek officials. The revelations stunned the galaxy. The massacre had not been an isolated crime. It had been part of a broader strategy. Certain leaders within the Dominion had deliberately targeted vulnerable human colonies, believing intimidation would discourage resistance. Even worse, some officials had hidden previous incidents for decades. As the evidence spread, public outrage erupted across hundreds of worlds. Citizens demanded answers. Governments launched investigations. Journalists uncovered additional scandals. For the first time, powerful individuals who had operated in darkness found themselves exposed beneath the full light of public scrutiny. Within days, humanity announced the formation of an independent interstellar tribunal. The decision surprised everyone. Many expected military executions. Others expected political purges. Instead, humanity chose law. Representatives from dozens of species were invited to participate. Legal experts reviewed evidence. Observers monitored proceedings. Every hearing would be public. Every verdict would be transparent. The trials began 1 month later. The galaxy watched closely. Former ministers stood before judges. Military commanders answered difficult questions. Corporate executives explained their actions. For many defendants, it was the first time they had ever been held personally accountable. Some denied everything. Others blamed subordinates. Several claimed they were simply following orders. The arguments sounded familiar. History had heard them before. The evidence proved stronger. One by one, the truth emerged. And one by one, the verdicts were delivered. The impact extended far beyond the Verec dominion. Across the galaxy, leaders suddenly realized something profound. Power no longer guaranteed protection. Position no longer guaranteed immunity. If humanity could bring powerful Verec officials to justice, anyone could face consequences. Political cultures began changing almost overnight. Government agencies became more transparent. Military oversight increased. Anti-corruption reforms gained support. The ripple effects reached worlds that had never even met a human. Yet not everyone welcomed this new reality. In hidden chambers and private meetings, the influential figures grew increasingly concerned. They saw humanity's actions not as justice, but as a threat. For centuries, power had operated according to familiar rules. Now those rules were changing. And change frightened those who benefited from the old system. Secret discussions began. Then alliances formed. Several powerful factions, each with their own reasons, reached the same conclusion. Humanity had become too influential. Too respected. Too dangerous. If allowed to continue, they might permanently reshape the balance of power. The solution seemed obvious. Remove them. Quietly. Completely. Plans were drafted. Fleets assembled in secret. Supply lines established beyond monitored regions. The conspirators believed they were being careful. They believed their preparations remained hidden. What they did not know was that human intelligence had already discovered everything. Months before the first ship moved, analysts on Earth had identified unusual patterns. Encrypted communications were intercepted. Financial transfers traced. Military logistics monitored. The conspiracy unfolded exactly as predicted. Human leadership chose not to intervene immediately. Instead, they watched. Gathering evidence. Waiting. Patiently. The same patience that had confused the galaxy for centuries. Then the attack finally came. Thousands of warships emerged from hyperspace along the outer boundaries of human-controlled space. The conspirators expected surprise. They expected confusion. They expected panic. Instead, they encountered preparation. Human defensive fleets were already in position. Planetary shields activated instantly. Strategic reserves mobilized within minutes. Artificial intelligence command systems coordinated responses across multiple sectors simultaneously. The attackers realized their mistake almost immediately. They had not launched an ambush. The battle that followed lasted less than 8 hours. When it ended, the attacking coalition ceased to exist as an organized military force. Thousands surrendered. Many commanders abandoned their ships. Others requested emergency negotiations. Humanity accepted every surrender. The war ended before most civilians even learned it had begun. The news shocked the galaxy. Not because humanity had won, By then, many expected that. The shock came from how completely prepared they had been. Every contingency anticipated. Every weakness covered. Every response measured. Humanity wasn't merely powerful. Humanity was prepared in ways no one had imagined. For generations, they had endured pressure without breaking. Every challenge became a lesson. Every setback became an opportunity to improve. And now, standing stronger than ever, humanity approached the final stage of its response. Not another battle. Not another trial. Something far greater. Something capable of changing the future of the entire galactic union forever. And for the first time, the galaxy was ready to listen. A new order. 1 year after the tragedy at New Dawn, representatives from every corner of known space gathered at the Galactic Union capital. Never before had so many civilizations attended a single session. Massive transport vessels filled orbit. Delegations occupied every available diplomatic complex. News networks broadcast continuously. The entire galaxy was watching. Everyone knew history was about to be made. The Great Assembly Chamber, normally filled with endless debates and political maneuvering, carried a very different atmosphere that day. There was tension. There was uncertainty. But above all, there was anticipation. For months, one question had echoed across countless worlds. What would humanity do next? The answer would determine the future of the galaxy. As delegates entered the chamber, conversations remained quiet. Many species had spent generations viewing humans as secondary players in galactic affairs. Now those same species waited for humanity to take the central stage. At precisely noon Galactic Standard Time, the chamber doors opened. The human delegation entered. No military escorts accompanied them. No displays of power filled the hall. No dramatic announcements preceded their arrival. The representatives simply walked to their seats with calm confidence. Yet the effect was remarkable. The room became completely silent. Not because anyone feared them. Because everyone respected them. Humanity had earned that respect through discipline, restraint, and unwavering determination. The silence lasted until Ambassador Maya Chen stepped forward. She paused briefly and surveyed the enormous chamber. Thousands of delegates watched her. Trillions more watched from distant worlds. The moment felt enormous. Then she began speaking. We did not come here to claim victory. Her voice carried clearly throughout the hall. We did not come here to seek power. Several delegates exchanged curious glances. Many had expected demands. Perhaps territorial concessions. Perhaps permanent military authority. Instead, Ambassador Chen continued. We came because the system that was meant to protect us all failed. A massive holographic display activated behind her. Images appeared throughout the chamber. Records. Documents. Historical timelines. Investigative reports. The evidence stretched back centuries. Delegates watched as examples of corruption, political favoritism, and unequal treatment appeared before them. Not only cases involving humanity. Cases involving dozens of species. Entire civilizations had suffered under the flaws of the existing system. Many representatives looked uncomfortable. Others appeared genuinely shocked. The scale of the problem was larger than most had realized. For generations, influential governments and powerful corporations had manipulated regulations for their own benefit. Complaints disappeared inside endless bureaucratic procedures. Investigations stalled. Justice often depended on political influence rather than facts. New Dawn had simply exposed a much deeper problem. Humanity had not created the crisis. They had revealed it. Ambassador Chen allowed the evidence to speak for itself before continuing. The question before us is simple. She posed. Do we rebuild the same system that failed, or do we create something better? The chamber remained silent. Nobody rushed to answer. Because everyone understood the importance of the choice. Then humanity revealed its proposal. Many expected demands for control. What they received instead surprised them. Independent oversight councils. Transparent investigations. Equal trade protections for all member species. Mandatory review procedures for military actions involving civilian populations. Universal anti-corruption standards. Public accountability requirements for senior officials. Safeguards preventing powerful governments from manipulating smaller ones. The proposals were ambitious. Perhaps even revolutionary. Yet as delegates reviewed the details, something became clear. The reforms were fair. Humanity had not designed them to benefit humans. They had designed them to benefit everyone. Debates began immediately. Some representatives supported the changes. Others opposed specific provisions. Weeks passed. Committees formed. Amendments were proposed. Entire sections were rewritten. The negotiations were difficult. At times they seemed impossible. But unlike previous eras, something had changed. Trust. For the first time in generations, many species believed meaningful reform was actually possible. The memory of New Dawn remained fresh. No one wanted another tragedy born from bureaucratic indifference. Gradually, support increased. Former rivals discovered common interests. Political opponents found areas of agreement. Even governments that traditionally resisted change began participating seriously in discussions. The process took months. But progress continued. Finally, the day of the vote arrived. The assembly chamber filled once again. Every seat was occupied. Every major network broadcast live coverage. Across the galaxy, the citizens gathered in homes, schools, offices, and public squares to watch. The vote began. One by one, representatives submitted their decisions. The results appeared slowly across the enormous display. Support continued growing. Then growing again. And again. By the time the final vote was counted, the outcome was undeniable. The reforms had passed by an overwhelming margin. For several seconds, the chamber remained silent. Many delegates simply stared at the results. Centuries of political tradition had changed in a single day. Then applause erupted. The sound spread throughout the hall. Delegates stood. Some cheered openly. Others smiled with visible relief. History had taken a new direction. And everyone present understood they were witnessing a defining moment. News spread rapidly across non-space. Celebrations broke out on countless worlds. Editorials described the vote as the beginning of a new era. Political analysts predicted lasting changes throughout the galaxy. Most agreed on one point. Without humanity, none of it would have happened. Yet when reporters attempted to give humanity sole credit, the human leaders disagreed. "We simply forced the conversation," Ambassador Chen told journalists. The galaxy chose its own future. The statement reflected humanity's philosophy perfectly. Leadership without domination. Influence without control. Strength without arrogance. Still, one major issue remained unresolved. What would happen to the Verek Dominion? Many expected punishment. After everything that had occurred, such a response would have been understandable. Instead, humanity once again surprised everyone. Human reconstruction teams entered former conflict zones. Economic assistance programs were launched. Infrastructure projects received funding. Educational exchanges began operating across multiple systems. The objective was simple: help ordinary citizens rebuild their lives. Human leaders made an important distinction. The officials responsible for atrocities had already faced justice. Their citizens should not suffer for crimes they did not commit. Their approach transformed former enemies into partners. At first, many Verek citizens viewed human assistance with suspicion. That reaction was understandable. Trust takes time. But year after year, cooperation continued. Trade routes reopened. Universities established partnerships. Entire communities recovered. Slowly, all hostility faded. Then friendships emerged. The galaxy watched with amazement. Humanity had defeated an enemy. Then helped them recover. Such behavior was almost unheard of in interstellar history. The lesson spread far beyond Varec space. Powerful civilizations studied humanity's actions carefully. Military academies analyzed the campaign. Political institutions examined the reforms. Historians documented every decision. Again and again, they reached the same conclusion. Humanity's greatest strength was not its fleet. Not its technology. Not its economy. It was self-control. The ability to wield enormous power without being consumed by it. The ability to seek justice without surrendering to vengeance. The ability to rebuild when destruction would have been easier. As the years passed, the memory of New Dawn remained painful. But it also became something else. A turning point. A reminder. A warning against complacency. Humanity learned an important lesson from the tragedy. Patience was valuable. Essential, even. But patience without limits invited abuse. There must always be a point where action replaces endurance. Where principles are defended. Where accountability becomes unavoidable. The galaxy learned that lesson too. And because it did, the future that followed would be stronger than the past that came before. Yet the story was not over. Far from it. Because long after the reforms were passed and the wounds of war began to heal, a new generation would ask an important question. Why did the entire galaxy still remember the day humanity's patience finally ended? The answer would become a legend. The day no species ever forgot. 200 years later, the story of New Dawn was still taught in every major educational institution across the galaxy. It didn't matter whether a child lived on a prosperous core world or a remote colony at the edge of explored space. Sooner or later, they would learn about the day humanity's patience finally ended. Entire libraries were dedicated to the events. Historical documentaries filled public archives. Political leaders referenced the lessons in speeches. Military academies studied the campaign as one of the most disciplined operations in recorded history. Yet the reason the story endured was not what many outsiders expected. It wasn't because humanity had won. History was full of victorious civilizations. It wasn't because humanity possessed overwhelming military strength. Many empires had once claimed that distinction. And it certainly wasn't because of the battles themselves. Those battles had ended generations ago. No. The reason the story survived was much deeper. One afternoon, on a peaceful world known as Arion Prime, a young student sat in a classroom overlooking a crystal blue ocean. Her name was Tolia. Like millions of children before her, she was studying galactic history. A large holographic display showed images from 2 centuries earlier. Human memorials. Union reform sessions. Reconstruction projects. And the famous image of the New Dawn Remembrance Wall. Tolia raised her hand. Her teacher nodded. If all of this happened so long ago, she asked, why does everyone still talk about it? The question caused several students to glance toward the teacher. It was a reasonable question. After all, countless events had occurred since then. New discoveries. New alliances. New worlds. Yet this story remained special. The teacher smiled. Because every generation eventually asked the same thing. Tell me, he said, what do you think the story is about? Tolia thought for a moment. Human military power. The teacher shook his head. No. Then maybe it's about justice. Closer. She considered again. Or courage. Partly. The teacher walked toward the holographic display. With a simple gesture, he changed the image. The room now showed 3 scenes side by side. The first was the New Dawn massacre. The second showed the public tribunals. The third displayed human reconstruction teams helping former Varek worlds rebuild. Most species remember only one part of history, he said quietly. They remember victories or defeats. He pointed toward the first image. Humanity remembered suffering. Then he pointed toward the second. They remembered accountability. Finally, he pointed toward the third. And they remembered responsibility. The students listened carefully. Across the galaxy, similar lessons were being taught in thousands of classrooms. The teacher continued. When humanity gained enough power to destroy its enemies, the galaxy expected revenge. The image changed again. This time it showed massive human fleets positioned around Varek control space. They expected punishment. Another image appeared. Human aid workers rebuilding damaged infrastructure. They expected humiliation. Then came scenes of economic partnerships and cultural exchanges. What they received instead was justice. The classroom remained silent. Even after 2 centuries, the lesson retained its power. Because everyone understood how easily things could have ended differently. Humanity could have chosen conquest. They could have expanded their territory. They could have ruled through fear. Many civilizations throughout history had done exactly that. Humanity did not. And that choice changed everything. Back on Earth, the anniversary of New Dawn remained one of the most important observances in human history. Every year, people gathered at memorial sites. The names of the victims were read aloud. Not as symbols of anger. Not as calls for revenge. But as reminders. Reminders that indifference carries consequences. Reminders that justice delayed can become justice denied. Reminders that patience must never become surrender. The largest memorial stood near the original United Planetary Assembly building. Carved into polished stone were words known throughout the galaxy. Visitors traveled from hundreds of worlds simply to read them. The inscription stated, "Patience is a virtue. Endurance is a strength. But when injustice threatens the innocent, action becomes a responsibility." Over the centuries, those words became one of the most quoted statements in galactic history. Politicians referenced them. Teachers explained them. Parents shared them with their children. The lesson transcended species, cultures, and governments. It became universal. Meanwhile, humanity continued to grow and evolve. Their explorers ventured beyond known space. Their scientists unlocked remarkable discoveries. Their artists influenced cultures across countless star systems. The galaxy prospered in ways previous generations could scarcely imagine. Yet despite all those achievements, historians consistently return to the same defining moment. The day humanity finally stopped waiting. The day they stopped believing someone else would solve the problem. The day they chose to act. Not recklessly. Not angrily. Not blindly. But decisively. That distinction mattered. Because true strength was never about violence. True strength was about control. Control over fear. Control over anger. Control over power itself. Humanity had demonstrated all three. And in doing so, they transformed how the galaxy understood leadership. Years later, the monument was constructed at the Galactic Historical Archive, one of the most visited locations in known space. Representatives from every major civilization attended its dedication ceremony. At the center of the monument stood a simple inscription. No elaborate decorations. No grand statues. Just words. Words that perfectly summarize the lesson of New Dawn. Visitors paused before them every day. Some stood silently. Others reflected for hours. The inscription read, "Humanity was patient when patience was possible. Humanity was firm when firmness became necessary. And when given the power to destroy, humanity chose to rebuild." Those words became legendary. Because they revealed the truth that the galaxy had misunderstood for centuries. Human kindness had never been weakness. Human restraint had never been fear. Human patience had never been submission. It had always been a choice. A conscious decision to seek peace before conflict. To seek understanding before force. To seek cooperation before confrontation. The galaxy had mistaken that choice for vulnerability. They learned otherwise. And they learned it in the most unforgettable way imaginable. Long after the last witnesses passed away. Long after the battlefields had disappeared. Long after the scars of war had healed. The memory endured. Every civilization remembered the silence that followed New Dawn. The fleets emerging from hyperspace. The trials. The reforms. The rebuilding. Most of all, they remembered the lesson. That patience is powerful. But patience is not infinite. Even the most tolerant people have limits. Even the most peaceful civilizations have lines that cannot be crossed. And when those lines are crossed, action becomes necessary. That was why no species ever forgot the day humanity's patience finally ended. Not because humanity unleashed its power, but because humanity revealed the principles that guided that power. Justice instead of revenge. Responsibility instead of conquest. Hope instead of hatred. And as long as intelligent life existed in the galaxy, the story would continue to be told. A story not about war. Not about victory. But about a civilization that endured every insult, every betrayal, and every injustice until it could endure no longer. And when that moment finally arrived, humanity showed the galaxy what true strength really meant. That was the day humanity's patience ended. And that was the day the galaxy changed forever.